Welcome back to another edition of Scherable. I'm your host, Bill Scher, back on the back porch Wednesday night, 6 days before Election Day, or the last day of voting, if you will. And we have been treated to two Supreme Court rulings today, which will allow ballots to be counted if they arrive after Election Day in Pennsylvania, and with a longer time frame in North Carolina than the 3 days passed by the legislature in North Carolina. And these decisions went, on the surface, the opposite direction from the decision in Wisconsin, which disallowed any late ballots from being counted, if they were postmarked by Election Day. So why is that? Why did these go in different directions? And it says to me that if you think that the fix is in, if you thought that the Supreme Court was going to function as a blunt partisan tool to make it as to improve Trump's chances of winning and perhaps stealing the election, to make those chances as likely as possible, I think these decisions very much undercut that conspiratorial point of view. This doesn't make everyone in the Supreme Court, a bunch of sweeties, but we should be careful with our caricatures. Everyone got very twitchy when Brett Kavanaugh in the Wisconsin case cited Bush v. Gore to say state courts can't rewrite the laws from state legislatures. If that happens, the U.S. Supreme Court has a right to step in. And this came up in Bush v. Gore. Some folks thought these conservative justices, these federalists, these lovers of states' rights wouldn't want to intervene between a state legislature and a state court interpreting of state law, and yet they did. And I'm not here to defend Bush v. Gore by any stretch, but Kavanaugh was citing that principle in Wisconsin, so that immediately, Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, they all had roles in Bush v. Gore, working for the Bush legal team. So you can understand why the alarm bells go off. And when Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed, and the Republicans in Pennsylvania, even though they had lost just a few days ago in a 4-4 tie, they submitted their brief again, obviously thinking, now that Barrett's here, we can get a 5-4 and possibly win this thing. And a lot of folks assumed that was Trump's game, and Barrett was in on it. And I had set a post on Twitter where I said, I don't know what she's going to do here, but it would seem politically savvy for Barrett to not rush to have her first action be to cast a legally dubious vote to try to save Trump in this election. It would just ruin her credibility. It would ruin the court's credibility, and it would turbocharge the calls for court packing. And if the court does get packed or unpacked or rebalanced, however you want to characterize it, if that's what happens, well, that just diminishes her power and the power of the conservative majority. So if you're being a clear-thinking political strategist, you would not do that. Now, there's no reason to assume that Supreme Court justices function like political actors. They could be ideological zealots. They could be true attempts at true judges. Just look at the cases in front of them, and that's it. And again, I don't even know if this is what Barrett was thinking, but she could have been a partisan tool today. And instead she said, you know what? She didn't recuse. She could have did a little bit more for her credibility and said, I'm not going to be involved in any case relating to the election since I was just put here by one of the candidates. Did not do that. But she said, I'm too soon, haven't had a chance to look at the cases, not going to get involved for now. Now, she could get involved later. Rulings could happen after Election Day, which many of us wouldn't like. But for Barrett to stay out right now before critical cases before the election, for Kavanaugh to say, this was my principle in Wisconsin, that I thought the Wisconsin Supreme Court was rewriting the law written by the state legislatures, and that was inappropriate. Here in North Carolina, the state legislature passed a law, said, okay, you can accept ballots 3 days after. And then the election board pushed that out. I think it goes to 9 days. Forgive me if I'm getting that inexact. Gorsuch and Alito and Thomas said that was out of line by the Board of Elections in North Carolina. But Kavanaugh pointed out there is part of the law written by the state legislature that gives that leeway to the Board of Elections in cases of natural disaster. Gorsuch went apoplectic and said, this isn't a natural disaster. So to go back to, Amy Coney Barrett's point, even textualists can disagree how to interpret words. This is why there's more than one judge, because people have disagreements. But here you have Kavanaugh taking a principle he has set in Wisconsin and applying it in North Carolina and coming up with a result that benefits a different party. And Roberts seemingly, I think neither Roberts and Kavanaugh had a written opinion in the North Carolina case, but that is the clear inference of what happened there. So that just says to me that they are looking at these things case by case. The principles they're using may not be principles that you and I would use. They might seem obtuse, but they haven't been applying them in a strictly partisan way. That doesn't mean something could happen after the election that folks wouldn't like, that you and I wouldn't like. But Wisconsin is a state that Biden is pretty well ahead. Pennsylvania and North Carolina are closer than Wisconsin. So, if this was partisan, you wouldn't want to, if you're going to pick your state to get to meddle in, you'd meddle in Pennsylvania and North Carolina before you meddled in Wisconsin, most likely. Now, what is the broader import here? Obviously, we can read tea leaves and try to mind read what these justices do. Again, they may do something else in a matter of days that might be really bad. But I think it carries, and you and I can't do anything about it. We can't lobby the Supreme Court about either of these things. They're going to do what they're going to do. But I do think it matters to understand that to assume the most rudimentary caricature of the court, even now that it's 6-3, even with Barrett, even with the photo op that happened. And there are people that said to me when I was tweeting about this, to entertain the possibility that Barrett wouldn't be a partisan tool immediately upon arrival. The response was, she just did that photo op. Didn't you see the photo op? Of course I saw the photo op. Once you're on the court, it doesn't matter. You can do what you want. Trump can't boss her around. Doesn't mean she's going to be a noble heroine. It just means that she is going to operate the way she wants to operate. And so she didn't choose to do exactly what Trump wanted her to do when she got there. So to reduce them all to caricature, to reduce them all to being two-dimensional beings, if you're a Supreme Court lawyer, that's not a good idea, because you want to tailor your arguments to the specific justices and try to make arguments that are going to be compelling for them. And for the rest of us who aren't in the Supreme Court bar, this speaks to the whole question of court packing. You would be compelled to push to pack the court, unpack the court, rebalance the court, again, however you want to phrase it. you might be compelled to do that as soon as possible if you had already concluded this Supreme Court is fundamentally illegitimate. There is nothing they're going to do that will be redeeming. They're going to overturn the Affordable Care Act. They're going to overturn Roe. They're going to block anything significant Joe Biden does. So there's no point in waiting for the damage to occur. You should prevent that damage by expanding the court as soon as possible. But there is an alternative scenario here where the justices are not that brazen. Either because they are they don't see themselves as political actors, they look at things case by case, or they have degrees of political savvy, and they say, I'd love to overturn Roe v. Wade. I'd love to do it as soon as I could, but if I did that right out of the gate, that might bring on the court packing, and then my power will be depleted once that happens. If I give them cause for even a Joe Manchin and a Kirsten Sinema and a Dianne Feinstein to say we have no recourse here because we have throttled the ability for Democrats to govern, and we have reaped the whirlwind by overturning Roe v. Wade. If all that means is that a year later I'm back in the minority and all my rulings get chucked out the window, well, that doesn't do them very much good, does it? So that possibility exists. Now, to bring all this together, the possibility that the new majority is smart and savvy and clever, that's not fully reassuring, mind you. If they are smart enough to ensure they give themselves some credibility by not doing Trump's bidding right now and not rushing to overturn Roe v. Wade the first chance they get, that might help them achieve their goals over the long haul. So again, this is not to say that all is well if they're smart. But at the same time, if they are going to move slowly, that gives Democrats time to mitigate their actions through other means. In the case of the Affordable Care Act, they might pass a tweaked version of it that makes the whole case moot. I would not be surprised if they even went through budget reconciliation, which is a procedural way to circumvent filibustering. You can do it once a budget season, and they could slap on a 10-cent individual mandate through budget reconciliation, and it renders the entire case moot. That's in front of them. Because it involves the constitutionality of having a $0 individual mandate, whether that makes no longer a tax, yada, yada, yada. But on other matters, if you can wait to see what they do, if you have the breathing room to do that, you may conclude, you know what, there are some pretty big downsides to passing an alteration of the court through partisan means that would require eliminating the filibuster to the nuclear option first. And if Democrats did that, then guess what? Republicans can do that too the first chance they get. And then the Supreme Court becomes a partisan weapon and it loses all legitimacy. A third pillar of the three-legged stool of the U.S. Constitution no longer exists in the way that we have known it. So you might pause on that, knowing the Supreme Court is moving at a slower pace than you might have assumed after the Barrett confirmation. And then, sort of the game is afoot, if you will. Will a slow trek mean that Barrett and Gorsuch, et cetera, will get their way in due course? It will maybe take them 10 years, but they'll get there. Or does it mean that at some point, Alito and Thomas won't be there forever? And if that happens, in the days that they leave the court, if there's a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, they can be replaced through natural means, then the court gets rebalanced without going through the risks to the balance of the Constitution. So I do think what's happening today at least should make you pause and think, maybe it's a little more complicated than some thought when Barrett got confirmed. Maybe there is still individual differences between the judges, that maybe they're not there just to do whatever Trump tells them to do or Mitch McConnell tells them to do or what any other outside player, the Federalist Society, tells them to do. And we might want to see how they proceed over the next several months and several years before doing anything drastic like picking the court. I'll leave it on that note for now. Come back for more shareables in the near future. Please subscribe on YouTube if you can, if you wish. And if you want to support us financially, patreon.com/BillShare. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.